And we're live. We're coming to you live from the cave for another episode of Blockbuster Underground. We just finished watching. What is this week? Shit. It's early. Don't mind me. I just finished watching the 8th episode of Wandavision. And wow. Thank God for coffee. So, a whole bunch of shit happened this week. We finally, obviously, last week got the reveal that Agnes was actually Agatha Harkness, and she'd been behind everything that's been going on since the get-go. Sort of. Here's where it takes a weird turn. So this week starts off, you get the usual flashback thing. 47-minute runtime on this episode. 46, 47, minus the credits and the opening previously on WandaVision shit. We're looking at probably 37 minutes. So credits and everything else usually take up for about 10 minutes when all is said and done. But they packed a lot into 37 minutes, and some of it damn near brought a tear to my eye. Wow. So it starts off, the episode begins with a flashback to like Salem, Massachusetts in the 1693 or something, I think. Something like that. And you see them bringing Agatha into the forest. Bunch of witches, the coven. And apparently what she's done has been using powers above her station, where you got to level up to be able to use certain powers, and she's jumping levels, kind of like Doctor Strange was doing in the first movie, when he was like snagging all those books and reading them, and they're like, well, you wait, whoa, slow down, buddy, like you're not quite there yet. So they end up tying her to a stake in the middle of the forest and putting like magical cuffs on her and stuff, and then they start blasting her to destroy her because of she's basically evil as far as they're concerned. So they're zapping her with this blue magic, and then you see her purple magic start crawling back along the blue, and then she starts like sucking the life force out of all these witches. All of them drop dead, and then the last main one, who I think is Agatha's mother, she's got the brooch on too that Agatha's always been wearing through the entire series so far. So she goes full power and tries to kill her. Same thing happens again, purple against blue. Purple wins. Down she goes. Agatha grabs the brooch, puts it on, and then takes off into the sky and disappears. And then we get like, the Marvel credits shit going on. Cuts back to the basement, and she's there with Wanda. And Wanda, like, her eyes turn red. And Agatha's like, you can't read my mind. It's not allowed. And then Wanda goes to try to use her magic, and nothing happens. And Agatha's like, well, there's protection scrolls all around this room, and I put them there, so my magic's the only one that works in here. And she puts Wanda into like these magic cuffs and like slamming her against the walls and shit. And she's talking to her the whole time, saying, I've studied for years to do like basic transmutation, and she turns this bug into a bird. And she's like, how do you do what you do? Like, explain it to me. I want to know how you are doing this. Because that's like power levels even Agatha hasn't seen. So Agatha basically takes her back through the past. It's almost like a Christmas Carol in a way. And she goes through the door, and she's in her old apartment in Sokovia. And this is like when her parents are still alive. And she winds up living through the entire thing. It's funny too. Her dad comes home. He's got a briefcase full of like old rerun TV shows like I Love Lucy and Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched, all that sort of stuff. So it explains to us now why Wanda's so fixated on the whole sitcom thing. They used it apparently to improve their English. Every Friday night they'd sit down and watch a bunch of old American sitcoms. So Wanda lives through this whole thing, including the explosion that kills her parents, and then the Stark Industries bomb that lands in their living room, that her and Pietro are basically staring at for 2 days straight. And you see little Wanda reaching out towards the bomb, And then Agatha pulls her out and says, you cast a probability hex on that bomb. That's why it didn't explode in your face. You had powers back then. You were a little witch. And it's like, wait a minute. It's like they're starting to retcon Wanda's origin story here. So, because in Ultron it was the Mind Stone that Strucker experimented on her with that they say gave her powers, and Quicksilver gave his powers. But now they're saying she already had her powers? So, yeah, so we go on, and it cuts to, they go to the lab where they're experimenting on her, and you see her walk into the room, and there's the Loki's scepter with the Mind Stone in it, and the scientists are watching, and they're saying, well, nobody's ever lived through this. All of our subjects have died coming into contact with this thing. Is this just going to be another dead body for us? And you cut to Wanda, and she sees the stone come out of the scepter, and she walks up to it and touches it, and it turns from blue to the bright yellow it is. And she sees this vision coming out of the light that looks just like her OG fucking costume from the comics, with like the crown almost thing. And that was the thing too, the witch at the beginning, when she goes full blast trying to blast Agatha, you actually see like this blue magical crown appear around her forehead. So she sees, I'm thinking she's seeing herself, her future self, when she finally realizes her powers and goes full on. But so she sees that and then passes out, and the two scientists sitting there, they saw nothing. They just saw her standing there, and then she passed out. And they didn't see anything with the stone or the thing, and no. So the theory is now then that the Mind Stone unlocked her mutant ability, which she already had the whole time. So, next room they go to is the Avengers compound. Probably post. This will be during Civil War, or right after. No, this will be right after Pietro died. So before Civil War. And she's sitting in a room, because they had her just locked away for safety. And she's just sitting in a room watching Malcolm in the Middle on TV, again with the sitcom things. And Vision comes into the room, and he's like, anything? How can I help you? I've never experienced losing a loved one before, because I just don't have any loved ones. So I don't know what it feels like to go through that. And he's like, but think of it more like grief is love persevering, which is kind of a cute, sweet way of thinking about it too. And at this point, even Agatha's like wiping a tear from her eye. But yeah, so Wanda's slowly coming to terms with the whole thing in a way. And even Agatha says, facing your sorrow is your truth, which is the same thing Monica said in the previous episode about the whole thing with her and her mother. So everything's starting to tie together. They cut back to the next door opens, and it's the Sword compound, and it's when she, according to what Hayward said in the first couple episodes, he said she busted into the place, tore the place to shreds, and stole the body and took it back to Westview. So we're going to see this now. It's like, woo-wee! So we see her walk in, and they're like, okay, go in there, second door to the left, two lefts and a right. And so she walks in, blasts the doors open. They're like, oh, wait, we got to buzz you in. She's like, no, don't worry about it. Poof. And walks into Hayward's office, and he's like, okay, we know why you're here. And she's like, I want Vision. I want to give him a proper burial. It's what he deserves. And he's like, well, come here and see, look at this. And he walks her into this room, and it's overlooking this lab. and they're basically taking Vision to pieces. Like literally, they're carving him up and stuff. Really, woof. And Hayward's like, it's weird too that someone like you who could bring him bring him back from the dead, bring him back. And she's like, that's not why I'm here. And because Hayward's trying to make this sentient weapon, and even Wanda was like, no, that's not what he wanted. He didn't want to be a weapon in any way, shape, or form, and that's not. I don't want that happening. And he's like, well, he's not yours. He's ours. So, and Wanda then gets really pissed, smashes the window, like you see in the footage that Hayward shows everybody in the earlier episode, and drops down and walks over to Vision and puts her hand on his head. And she's like, using her magic, and she's like, I can't feel you. Which is heartbreaking too, because that's what they were saying to each other in Ultron. He was like, or in Infinity War, he's like, all I feel is you. So, tear. So she sits there and she's like, I can't feel you at all. And then walks out of the room. She doesn't take him. So Hayward's fucking bullshitting this whole time, because he's making it out to look like she bust into the place, like knocked everybody flying and stole the body. She didn't. Which it makes what happens next even more fucked up. She gets in her car. You see this piece of paper on the passenger seat. So she gets in her car, red car, fitting, and drives to Westview. And you see her driving through the town, and it's like, looks beat down because of the snap, and everybody closed and shops out of business. And you see Herb walking down the street, and you see the piano guy. Remember, that was my grandmother's piano. You see him, and you see the Mrs. Hart from the first episode sitting there. And Wanda drives up and pulls into this driveway and walks up, and there's just this barren space. And she looks down at the paper in her hand and unfolds it. And it's the property deed that Vision bought for them. And it says, to grow old in, V, in a heart. And then you see Wanda Maximoff, Vision, as the owners of the property, and she just loses it, drops to her knees, and this blast of red energy, and she starts building the house around her, and builds the house, and then you see the energy explode even further, and it envelops the entire town. And as this is happening, there's energy coming out of her that's basically creating Vision out of thin air. And so she creates him out of thin air, and in black and white, in like sitcom 50s era house. And you see him look down and look at his hands and looks up, and he's like, welcome home, Wanda. And you pan to her, and she's in her 50s get up, like in the first episode, with the hair all done. And they sit down on the couch and kiss, and he reaches over, grabs the remote for the TV, turns it on, and behind them you see Wanda in color watching this, and then it all fades away, and Agatha's sitting in the audience just clapping like this, and she's like, you finally figured it out. That's how you did this. And she snaps her fingers and disappears. And then Wanda hears Billy and Tommy outside yelling for her. So she runs out, and Agatha's there in full witch mode now, with these purple lassos around the kids' necks, floating like 10 feet off the ground. And she's like, I know what you are now, Wanda. There was a rumor or a story about someone as powerful as this that uses hex magic, and you're the Scarlet Witch. Credits. I was like, no! Again, they do it to us. So, but this time there is a post-credit scene. You pan to Hayward, and he's like, we're ready to go head to the next phases of our plan. And they walk into the tent, and he's like, we've been building and rebuilding a million times, and, all it ended up needing was a little bit of the source power. And they look down, and you see the drone that Wanda blasted from, like, episode 6, I guess, I can't remember, sitting there still glowing with like red hex power. and it pans over, and there's a computer screen. They turn this ignition key, and the power from the red hex power from the drone starts siphoning over, and they pan the camera over, and it's white Vision from the comics, the soulless Vision that's powered up now. Opens his eyes, and they're like bright light blue, and like, that's not Vision. And the thing in the hex, that's why he can't go out, is because he basically doesn't exist outside of Wanda's control. So, and now Wanda's, like I said, now she's a mutant. That's the gist of it. They are seeming to be implying now that the Mind Stone just unlocked her ability that she had all along. So I don't know what the hell's going to happen in the next episode, but oh my god. And if the next episode is not at least an hour and change, I'm going to be pissed. Because this one was the longest yet, and I think minus the credits, it still clocked in around 37 minutes. So, but as I said, a lot revealed, a lot answered, and it's shaping up to be one hell of a finale episode coming up next week. And then I think the week after we get the making of for the series, and then the week after that we start getting Falcon. So it's coming fast and furious now. Anyways, let me get this posted up, and we'll catch you on the next video. Ciao.